This is actually one of the reasons why Japanese people wear masks. They wore masks before the pandemic and well past the point when most people were not wearing masks in other countries. Not because they believe the masks work necessarily, but because they didn't want to be seen to cause trouble for others. What is good, everyone? Welcome to the channel. My name is Paul and I make videos about Japanese society, life and culture from the viewpoint of a long-term foreign resident. I've been in Japan for 18 years now. And today I want to talk about a concept or a word in Japanese that is very, very important for understanding Japanese society. If you ask people to describe Japanese society, you'll often hear words like peaceful, orderly, calm, that sort of thing. And one of the reasons that's often given for why this would be the case is because there's a lot of consideration for others in Japanese society. Japanese people really think about other people when they go about their daily life, and it polices their actions and what they do and say. Now, of course, this is in general a very, very good thing, and I'm going to talk about this concept that is important for this, which is known as Meiwaku. Meiwaku will often be translated as trouble, bothersome, nuisance, that sort of thing. So you want to avoid causing Meiwaku as much as possible in Japan. You don't want to be a nuisance for others. And as mentioned, this is obviously a very good thing for making an orderly society. It's the reason why Japanese line up very peacefully for everything. It's the reason why the trains are quiet and orderly, and it's peaceful to ride on the trains here. And it's the reason why Japanese city streets are so clean in comparison to many cities around the world. And you see, or I should rather say, I've experienced how this begins recently by raising my own child and talking to other parents in terms of how kids are raised to think about Meiwaku, causing problems for others. And it's very different. When you teach American kids like right or wrong, it's kind of this objective outside of everything. You do this because it's right, and you don't do this because it's wrong. Whereas in Japan, it's taught that you don't do this, or you do this because other people are watching you and you need to be concerned about what they think about that behavior or what you've said. And so it's very much influenced by what is outside of the person. You know, don't do this because people are going to be watching you and judging you, and you might be causing Meiwaku, nuisance, bother for other people, and you want to avoid doing that. Now, I've mentioned the obvious reasons, or rather the obvious output of why this is a good thing, but there are some negatives to Meiwaku as well. For one thing, it can be very tiresome and stifling, and you may not even realize this until you leave Japan and go to another country. I'll never forget going to Italy 2 years after living in Japan, and I remember the first couple days while I was there, I was paying attention to everyone around me. I was watching the Italian people. You know, how do they behave? How do they act? Because I didn't want to do something that would cause trouble for others. I'd already put this mantle of don't cause Meiwaku for others on. I'd become used to that from living in Japan. Until I realized that no one was paying attention to me. No one cared about how I was behaving in the way that they might in Japan. And so I just relaxed and let that kind of mask fall away. And it's like this whenever I go abroad. I realize that I'm not being scrutinized in the same way. So yeah, it can be kind of stifling. It can be suffocating in a way. And Japanese people say this as well. They talk about how they travel abroad and then they feel like they can be a little more themselves because they're not worried about causing trouble for others in the same way they might be in Japan. Now, of course, the flip side is that's why a society like America is going to be more fragmented, argumentative, confrontational than Japanese society, and that's, you know, that's the trade-off basically. Meiwaku can get, or not get worse, but be problematic in other situations as well, such as it's one of the reasons why Japanese work overtime hours and don't take their vacation days. And it's simply because there's this feeling that if I take my vacation days, I will be causing Meiwaku to my coworkers. They'll have extra work to cover, or they may just feel bothered that I'm not there to help out with something. And so by actually taking your allotted vacation days or going home at an ordinary hour can be seen as Meiwaku, and therefore the Japanese won't do it because they don't want to cause this trouble for others. It can get even worse in the sense that you will see articles in newspapers and online about neighborhoods where there have been complaints about the sounds of children at kindergartens and nursery schools. Like the loud children are causing Meiwaku for the neighborhood. And I just can't help but think how sad that is. Like, when you were a child, did you not make noise? Do you realize that this generation that is shrinking and shrinking is going to be the ones paying your pension in the future? Like, in a country where the birth rate is famously falling, that's just kind of a sad thing to complain about. Even in my own neighborhood, there's this kind of infamous elderly couple who built their house right next to a park and then would complain to the neighborhood association about how there were noisy children playing in the park. And it took on this reputation amongst parents in the neighborhood that maybe we shouldn't let our kids play there. And I'm thinking, unbelievable. Like, it's not their park. What were they thinking building next to a place that has children's play equipment? It's ridiculous that the parents and the children have to police their behavior just because of one busybody couple who feel bothered by the sounds of children's voices. Again, it's just kind of sad. But it can get even darker, and I'm going to edit in a subtitle here, a place in the video where you can skip forward to if you don't want to watch this next bit because it involves child harm. So yeah, skip ahead if you don't want to hear it. Okay. Where I used to live about 7 years ago, there was actually a case where a mother killed her 2 children, and part of the reason, at least as it was reported, was because there had been a lot of complaints from neighbors about her children being noisy. And the stress had just built up, and so finally she took care of the noise. Now obviously there were probably some other mental issues, she probably had some other things going on, but it seemed like this stress over causing Meiwaku to the neighbors actually led to this terrible, terrible incident. And obviously that's not incredibly common, but there are extremes that people will take to not cause Meiwaku to others. You know, don't be a nuisance. And that's just a really unfortunate example. All right, that story out of the way. Again, we want to consider the trade-offs of the society. Overall, not causing trouble for others can be seen as a very good thing in Japanese society. It's one of the reasons why Japanese society runs so well or so nicely. So I don't want to overemphasize the bad, because actually being considerate towards others is obviously a good thing in most instances, and it helps, you know, Japan be the place that it is. Meaning, if you come here as a tourist, all I would say or kind of ask you to be aware of is try to be as little of a bull in a china shop as possible. Be a little bit more careful about your behavior than you might be in other countries where they don't care about or police others' behaviors quite as much. And certainly if you're going to live here, you're going to have to consider that you will be putting on this kind of mantle of really paying attention and not trying to be a nuisance to others. And if that sort of thing sounds like it's just too much work, or it's going to be so stifling that you're going to freak out at some point, then Japan might not be the best place to live if that's, you know, you feel your character won't be able to handle that. So just something to consider in that regard. As I mentioned before, I was going to get back to the idea of how children are raised, and the idea of Meiwaku is obviously outsider perception, and how that is really how behavior is policed rather than some objective right or wrong truth. There's a small dark side to that as well, in that it's kind of like if the tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear, does it make a noise? If you do a certain prohibited behavior and no one else is around, is it Meiwaku? Well, In many instances, the answer is no, it's not Meiwaku. And that is the reason why you will find incredibly clean Japanese cities, but you head out onto remote forest roads and you'll find veritable dumping grounds of trash. Because if you go out into the countryside where there is no one and you just dump it off the side of the road, you're not causing any Meiwaku. It's not like littering is bad, it's just littering where people can see you litter is bad. I actually did a whole video about Japan's strange relationship with garbage. Another reason people do this, of course, is large garbage items cost money to throw away in Japan, and people want to avoid that cost. In fact, that's why someone like this could be seen going around neighborhoods offering to take away your goods, and they might pay you a fee or they might offer to take it away for less money than it would cost otherwise. I don't know how that loud neighborhood announcement doesn't count as Meiwaku itself. I hate it when loudspeaker trucks go by in Japan. They're all over the place during election season with politicians screaming, "Vote for me, my name is Watanabe," or Saito, or whatever, "Vote for me," super loud loudspeakers. Not Meiwaku, I guess, or Shogunai, can't be helped Meiwaku perhaps. But at any rate, Meiwaku, don't causing a nuisance, or don't be a nuisance, don't cause problems for others, is such an important part of living in Japan and being part of Japanese society. Overall net positive in my opinion, but it also, we can't just ignore and hide from the negatives. So I wanted to let everyone who watches my channel know about this. I hope it was informative and interesting and that you learned something from it. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button. Share this with someone you know who might be going to live in Japan or who lives there now or is going to travel as a tourist. It would help out the channel a lot if you would do that sort of thing. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I just want to thank you very much for watching this particular video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Peace.